I believe we are live, and this community call will be with the one and only Derek, who is the CTO at Bainbridge. Hi, Derek. It's really good to have you here. I really appreciate you being on this call and making the time and effort to even create the demo for everyone to see.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So for people who don't know you, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit, introduce who you are and what exactly is Bainbridge.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can get into the deck for that. But thanks for being here again. Thanks for taking a little bit of time this afternoon. So what is Bainbridge? And we're changing our name soon. I can't tell you, but I know you're on the edge of your seats. So we provide strategic finance for scaling brands, the value you get from a FP&A team at 1/4 the cost. So what does that mean? Basically, FP&A is financial planning and analysis. So if we work with a lot of Shopify and Amazon businesses, a lot of DTC folks. So if you ever get to a certain size and you have a lot of data concerns, we're the ones that help with financial model, help you decide, am I ordering the right inventory? Do I have the right financial governance in place? When people go to do fundraising, we help with that. So we help with a wide array of, helping with their finances. And with that, there's a lot of data involved in that. So for me, I'm in the Boston area. I've been doing tech about 24 years. And, I'm CTO and have done a lot of the coding on this. And we initially started with a very data-heavy platform. So it's pretty good fit. So again, I've talked about our customer base. They are utilizing primarily Shopify. They're also doing Amazon. They're also doing a number of other channels to sell their goods, wholesale. They're using ad channels, Meta, Google, Snap. You can read all those. Finance using QuickBooks, Xero, NetSuite, Stripe to get their financial data in, and then other stuff. Rodeo Recharge. These are all subscription services. Klaviyo, Marketo. Those are your marketings, your systems, inventory. So they're all basically, manage their inventory, acquiring customers. For the ad channels, finance channels are they can track their financials, and then the shipping and logistics, FedEx, DHL. That's how they're getting goods to customers. And then we have our piece, which is the smart model. So we produce an Excel financial model that basically, takes data from all these sources, crunches it, and helps you optimize your business, run your business better. Again, we do a lot of help with fundraising, a lot of help with inventory, and basically, we try and project customer long-term value, and help on the acquisition side as well. So with 15 or 20 customers and this many sources, you can imagine we've got a lot of data coming in. We utilize Airbyte extremely heavily. And one of the things I'll say is that there's some, couple levels here. I've got e-com channel, ad channel, finance channel. Then I've got, Shopify, Amazon wholesale. And then our customers when they get to a certain size, our services get way more valuable. And a lot of them have multiple brands. So it's not only Shopify, but they'll have multiple Shopify stores. Some have, one store per country. So they have 4 or 5 stores, one per country. Some have multiple brands. They're a reseller and they have a bunch of different brands. So they have different Shopify stores. So not only is it, multi-tenant from a customer perspective, then each customer has multiple channels. Some of those channels also have sub-channels among them. Similarly with QuickBooks, they get multiple QuickBooks accounts. We often run into people that have, multiple ads accounts as well. As they've grown, they will spin up, whatever, they'll get banned or something will happen and they'll spin up another ad account. So we have to deal with that, extra little layer of funnel. So basically multi-tenant requirements or complications here. So a lot of folks we deal with, again, we're SaaS. So 15 or 20 at this point, growing quickly. And part of the challenge is, making infrastructure that fits well for this size customer base and also can scale out to, hundreds of customers where we want to be. So,
and with all these, about 20 customers that you have, they all use multiple connectors that you built custom connectors with them as well.
Yeah. So they're all using at least one e-com channel, multiple ad channels, at least one finance channel, usually another stuff, like some other stuff. Cause again, the top line of there, or if you're a subscription-based retailer, you'll have subscriber things. Pretty much everybody's using email marketing. So there's one in there. They're all doing some shipping, and then they all have the bottom bucket, which is our smart model. And one of the cool things is that we developed if you look at, Excel, when you say you hit, I want to see a pivot table that fly out on the right-hand side, that can house a browser. So we wrote a React app that lives in there that basically is the conduit from our model back and forth to our warehouse. So there's a pretty cool JavaScript API. So Cool.
Nice.
Yep. So yeah, multi-customer, they each have multiple channels, which we showed on the last slide, and some have multiple stores. And some people have 0 or more channels, right? You may only be using Facebook and Google. So we need to handle the fact that not every customer's data profile is going to be the same. So things have to degrade gracefully when you don't, for example, have the things you might expect. We try to deliver insights on an hourly basis so people can look at the dashboard and say, like, how am I doing today? And one of our key metrics is performance versus financial plan. If you said you're going to do $2 million this month and it's halfway through the month, are you $1 million? Are you under or you're over? So we're delivering this very value-added view. We try and keep the data up to date hourly for what's critical, and nightly for stuff like long-term value calculations or customer retention, stuff that doesn't need to be constantly recalculated, should be generally up to date. That's what we use for sort of nightly. So we have two stacks of jobs, hourly and nightly. We're using Airbyte Cloud and OSS. And we've built a custom connector and done some code modification on some of the existing connectors as well, because some of our customers are saying, I've got this thing, I really need it, and we'll be able to use the CDK and build an additional connector and launch it in OSS. Dealing with what everybody deals with, multi-currency, multi-time zone. I think if you deal in, even if you're not dealing with multi-tenancy, these are some things that are seemingly simple, but seemingly awfully painful. The next one is standard schema. So I wanted to have, as we grow out our customer base, not have the problem of, oh yeah, this table exists over here for this customer, this doesn't exist in that customer. So you need to have a standard schema, but also that bullet, like with extensibility, because sometimes a customer will, have us do extra analyses for them where we put those. So something that's a standard core product and then extensible extra tables that I can bolt on as needed. One of the nice things DBT provides is you can run in different targets. So you can have a production and dev target. So I have that wired as well. That was a requirement. And also some of our customers come in and they want their data filtered and cleansed, which means I do a lot of orders, but I do a ton of these like $0 free stickers. And if I include this in my order count, my average order value goes down a bit. So when I do my books, I get rid of those. So in order to match my QuickBooks, can you get rid of those orders in Shopify? So we end up with these very custom filters. Again, how do you house specific customer code in a warehouse that you're trying to keep generic? One of our other value adds is cross-customer benchmarks, right? We take all of our customers' data and anonymize it and cram it together so we can provide stuff like, what were the average CPCs and CPMs on Facebook yesterday across our customers? So if you're having a hard day on the ad, in the ad game, you can look at our benchmark and say, oh, it looks like the market's having a bad day, or wow, it's that last, looking back a week, was it my campaign or the market? So giving our customers that and across ads metrics and other financial metrics, just to say, is it me or is it the market that's doing this to me? We want to use aggregated views. Some customers, if they have 4 storefronts, want to roll the data up as, I want to see all my revenue, my gross sales across all the stores in once. And sometimes they want that data, I said aggregated and combined, aggregated and separated. They want their data separated out to say, actually, I just want to focus in on this one store. So I need the ability to combine things nicely, but also segregate them out. And in order to do things like cohorts or long-term value, I need to go pull everybody's history. So I have this bit of a paradox, which is I want everybody's data, but I want it to be really quick to pull hourly. So that's, one of those hard requirements. So philosophically, customer's own data. We believe that it's their data and it's their data to be in there and play with. So we will give customers access to the warehouse and say, this is your data, go play, go have fun. Also, if they offboard, it is yours. We will sign over the GCP project to them and say, you pay for it, you got it. Philosophically, also, I want to have global dependency management, global configuration, and I need to be able to pull stuff in parallel. Because if you look at all those sources, I don't want everything to run in serial because it would take forever. But there's also some sanity in having things that need to run in serial, right? So parallel, I can pull all my ad channel data. But if I'm going to generate a projection that is my Shopify data with my ads data stitched onto it, I need to let all that stuff finish and then roll it up. So there's some orchestration they need to do to make sure that the dependency tree is controlled by me and I know exactly when jobs are going to run. I'm going to separate my raw data pulls from what I'm calling my combined data from my process data. So the raw data is just the stuff that comes in from Airbyte, gets landed. The combined data is, again, if you've got 4 stores and 3 Facebook accounts and all that stuff, I'm going to generate a combined data set, and also a combined data set that encompasses all of your company's history. So the hourly and the recent data plus the historical data. And then the process data is, I'm going to do LTV calculations and cohorting and predictions and cool data stuff on top of that. So separating into sort of 3 phases. So I always can go back to raw and ask good questions, but the value is really in that process data. And then reducing the downstream knowledge, which is basically for code downstream consuming this data. I don't want to have it constantly worrying about, does this table exist for this customer? Does this customer have this thing, right? I don't want the pipeline to break down. A very common thing is you're working with one customer, pretend one customer has, they're using TikTok and Bing for ad channels. And I write some code that like joins TikTok and Bing and does a bunch of stuff. And then I deploy it, and some customer doesn't have Bing. The pipeline can't crash for them because they don't have that channel, right? It's got to be very resilient to differences in customer configuration. So where we landed was I have 1 GCP project per customer. We're using Google Cloud, so I'm using GCP. 1 GCP project per customer. And again, that was so I have their data walled off. From a cost perspective, I can see who's costing me money. I can just run a nice report and say like, oh, that customer is costing us a lot of money and compute and stuff. So what's going on there? And also, again, if they want to take their data and they want to offboard, I just change the billing account, they get the project, and they go on their happy way. Centralized configuration and orchestration using Airflow. Again, this is not uncommon. And I'm having jobs, 2 classes of jobs. Some jobs are running per customer, time frame, like customer A nightly or customer B daily. And I've got a couple of global jobs to generate those benchmarks and other things I was talking about earlier. Using DBT, and I'm driving that off the same configuration. Again, I've got raw data, combined data, and that like digested data that I'm using for the LTV and the other stuff. And Airbyte, multiple jobs, again, some running hourly, some nightly, most of them per customer, but I've got some cross-customer jobs, like just go pull the currency data, pull my current currency code. So when I need to do a conversion later, I can stitch that in. So some jobs are landing data in a generic place that every project can get to. And most jobs are per customer. We've got a little bit of schema management tooling to just deal with a couple tables, mainly out of our financial model, because DBT does an awesome job with schema management. You can always, you can tell it to rebuild tables, you can force it, and then it'll redo schema. So DBT handles a ton of that for us. And then we've 1 centralized project to do benchmarks and cross-customer stuff. And then what I was talking about, sort of cross-customer code safety, like all downstream tables philosophically always must be present. So nobody that's trying to consume the data can write something that works on customer A and doesn't work on customer B. So here's a visual of where we landed. I've got a core DAG file, if you will, which is, an Airflow DAG, a Python file, which drive, you upload into Airflow and runs. And I've got configuration JSON blobs, and I'm going to show the code in a little bit, that get injected into that DAG file. And basically the DAG file is common per core product, but every customer has a nightly and an hourly JSON blob in a file that I also upload to Airflow, and those become the expressions of the Airflow jobs themselves. And then there's a couple nightly jobs that are customer agnostic that run my benchmarks and other tasks. So all that gets uploaded to Airflow, and it does the orchestration. It's calling Airbyte. Again, it's calling Airbyte Cloud. It's doing OSS. We've got some OSS custom connectors, and then it's orchestrating DBT as well, and all ends up in BigQuery. And we've got, our product over here, the add-in and the model, and we're using some Looker Studio and other things for data visualization. For those that know Airflow, here's the Airflow DAG, and this is just a really gross picture to show like all the data pulls occurred in parallel and all the rollups occur in serial. I'll show the DAG in a minute, but you'll see why that occurs. But this is kind of the like controlling everything because I want all my data pulled as quickly as I can get it, and I'm going to crunch on it and provide views. So let's do a little bit of code looking. So basically, is this zoom level appropriate?
It looks good to me. If anyone needs it to be a little larger, just let us know in chat. It looks good to me.
Cool. So this is basically for my customer call test customer. And, I'm setting a few variables. So this is the hourly JSON blob that I'm configuration injecting. And this configuration lives as a JSON file in the Airflow directory. So what happens is I onboard a customer, I make an hourly and a nightly file for that customer, and I go through and I configure all the things that we know about that customer. And then I go set up all my jobs and orchestrate from here. So, you know, I've got the name and the schedule interval, and these are things that go into Airflow, right? The schedule interval, the currency gets patched to Airflow and to DBT, time zone, you know, are these in Shopify, FB ads, Google ads, like what things are turned on and off for this particular customer? And again, this file is the exact same for each of my customers on an hourly basis. I'm just flipping this stuff on and off and controlling, yeah, you're going to run it. This is not an hourly one. This is clearly running once a day at 6:30. But anyway, and then sort of here's sort of the piece that makes it all happen, right? I've got this config variable, and I'm again redefining some variables above, just kind of stuffing them in config. And I've got this thing, Shopify connection ID. So this is a case where I've got a Shopify customer with 3 different stores. And some folks might recognize this sort of thing. This is the connection ID of Airbyte. So this can be used to say, using the Airbyte API to say, hey, Airbyte, can you go run this connector? And I've got a variable defined. So it's going to find it at my internal container called Airbyte Airflow Shop 1, which it knows how to find because you configure Airflow to know how to go get to that container. So it's going to post to this and say, hey, I want you to run this job now. Similarly, I don't have these 2 wired. These are just sort of examples, but you can imagine doing the same thing for, for cloud. I'm seeing customers come in, questions come in, which are awesome. I'm going to get those afterwards. So let's see, Airbyte Cloud. So yeah, this would be the second store, and it's got stores, customer store 2, and I could vary the time zone. And again, I've got the currency defined as a global here. So the currency just is going to be the same for all these guys. And again, I've got a section for configuring Facebook. Again, the Facebook connection ID is running on a different internal container, Airbyte Airflow ads 1. So this is going to post to ads 1 using this connection ID and say, hey, when this job kicks off, I need you to run this. Similarly for Google. And there's a bunch of stuff this customer doesn't have on. So it's not a very interesting customer in that way. It's only got 3 Shopify stores, a Facebook and a Google, but these things get really, really large. I basically just
imagine how large it can get.
Yeah. So this is a straightforward test customer, but this is sort of the template I build from anyway. And then I add stuff as I need it. And then I go up here and, I'm turning these on and off based on what's going on. These have Klaviyo enabled, but it's not there. So anyway, but you're going to say, like, this is not an Airflow DAG. This is a blob of JSON. Why is this useful? So it's useful because I take that whole config object. This is Python code. Take the whole config object and this run DAG hourly. So this ends up here. And this file is the brains of the actual, this contains the actual DAG file itself, or the DAG. So this, the job of this code is so that I can, again, have the pipeline as generic for all of my customers, but I can inject all that configuration. So all the config JSON gets injected into here and basically turned into the set of directives that are needed for to run. And I've got one called run DAG hourly and run DAG nightly. So here I'm, 1,500 lines lower. Here's that ugly picture I showed before with all the parallel and non-parallel jobs. Here is that stuff actually being executed. And if I scroll a little bit upwards, I can see an example that's basically, if I go back to this file, remember I have this Facebook Airbyte connection ID. And this is, again, the main code drives it. This got injected via config. And it says, if Facebook Airbyte connection ID is in my config blob, then I want you to make a task, point at this server, and using the connection ID, which again was this lovely little bit, this A2B, this thingy. And I want you to actually, this is the Airbyte trigger sync operator, which is part of Airflow. This is the thing actually doing the work to invoke Airbyte. And if I don't have one, just use the dummy operator and don't do anything. And give me a little job, it's skipping. So a lot of those things you saw in that big ugly DAG, a lot of them were just like skipping, I don't have one. And yes, I could meta program this and be a lot cuter and like not have all these jobs explicitly laid out, but I've chosen this route because A, it drives drives my IDE bananas to have these all undefined functions, and B, I'm already doing a lot of, meta meta stuff to like bring these things into existence or not. So the code above basically is saying like, am I a dummy operator, or I'm actually gonna, I'm actually gonna run the DBT code, or am I actually gonna run the, in that case, it's Airbyte code. But since I mentioned DBT, the next thing is all those DBT transforms get run, and the same thing, except in the DBT transforms, I pass the entire configuration structure, not just what Airbyte needed, which was the connection string. I'm going to pass the entire blob. So that's what this looks like. This is an example of a DBT model that would get invoked by that code. So it basically gets the entire blob passed into it. It shows up as a variable. And if you remember back, this var, if Shopify is enabled. So if I go back to my JSON blob, that is this guy. So he comes in as configuration. And in DBT, I can just reference it as a var and say, if Shopify is enabled, okay, keep going. And then I rip through. Again, I can be much more eloquent, but I know I'm only going to have 10 Shopify stores maximum. Eventually, I can increase it. So for number 1 to 10, I start ripping through all of them. Basically, I'm checking to see, like, does that thing that you configured actually exist? Because what you told me is there's a Shopify store, and his recent data set is Shopify raw 1 in BigQuery. So now I'm going to go out to Shopify raw 1 and say, like, I don't trust you. Does that thing actually exist before I go down here and try and execute a query against a data set that doesn't exist? So I'm checking the existence of all the tables I need. And I'm building this structure up, which is basically for every Shopify store, in this case, channel, vertical, company name. This again comes out of the var, company name, company ID, the currency, the time zone, and does the darn thing exist and what type is it? And then I can, using that, execute my query, and I can inject back in stuff like the store, the company ID, the company name, the time zone, the currency. And then this code basically now can handle all of my customers, because I've got one model and I have the configuration being injected in, and it's being, out of the config, I'm pulling back out all the pieces that I need to know, like what's your time zone, what's your store, what's your this. So every customer now has a copy of this exact model in the warehouse. And then one of the things, I'll hit one more point, then I'll be done. But basically the ads are interesting because you've got lots of channels to pick from, right? And we've got some that are custom to us and customers never are going to have all of these. So this is the point of, this is why I was saying earlier, you always have to have a version of a model, because once you run a DBT transform, it's going to run a query and you're going to get a model whether you want to or not. So when you do stuff like this, you can see the problem is if a customer only had Facebook and Google, I can either do my check here to say like, oh, does this customer have TikTok? Does this customer have Snapchat? Which means that everybody that writes a query then has to be checking for like, does this exist? But what I try and do, and you may hate it, is that I basically do a bunch of checks and say like, look, if you don't have Snapchat, that's cool. In this case, Commission Junction, just let's be okay too. Let's just put in a row that if you try and left join this row in, it's always going to miss because it's got no stores, because that's sort of my foreign key into this data. So you'll always get a miss, but it's going to prevent somebody from writing a query that unions stuff in and the table's not even there. So again, that's how I try to downstream protect myself against that. So that was the code walkthrough, and that was what I had. So I'm happy to look at the questions thing. And
we have a lot of questions that came in.
Okay.
And I'll read the first one. It's from Abu Bakar. Is the Airflow deployed per customer, and is it using cloud infra like AWS or GCP?
Good question. So let's see, I'm using Cloud Composer, which is the GCP wrapped. Did you ask about Airbyte or Airflow? So Airflow, yes. I'm answering the right thing. Airflow. It is a cloud wrapped Airflow. I'm using Composer just because I didn't want to deal with setting that thing up. And I've got one global one. And the way I'm handling that is, again, since I'm using one of these configuration blobs per customer, my Airflow instance basically has a lot of jobs, but I've named them in a way that's, customer hourly Airflow thing. So I can just, and then I'm using the tagging function as well. In Airflow, you can tag jobs. So I tag it with the customer name, whether it's hourly and whether it's like ads or other stuff.
I think you showed this, but just in case. And then from Tony Zhao,
Yep.
asked, how do customers connect their Shopify accounts? Do you use Powered by Airbyte, or did you write something custom, completely custom?
Good question. We have our own Shopify app and our own quick start flow that gets connections. It's because it's a core to us. We decided to, and I know that in the Shopify connector has been in alpha for quite a while, and so we have our own app that we've built, and we quick start in. We do QuickBooks and Shopify on our own in that way because, we just wanted to control those two tokens. But all the ad channels I use cloud because, like, I've written so many OAuth 2 apps in my life that I'm sort of, unless I really need to, I don't need to do any more of those.
And for Michael Green, are you configuring connections with Octavia or manually? Octavia, right?
UI or what do you mean Octavia?
So we have a CLI on Octavia. If you don't use it, if you don't, yeah.
Oh, no. I really should be using, on my list, I'm invoking the connections using the API, and on my short list for like this next month is using the API to generate these connections because it's annoying. So I should be doing it, but I'm not, and it's on my short list. I set up all my other GCP infrastructure in a script except that piece, so I should be doing it.
There are a ton of questions, so I'm going to try to go through this as fast as possible. So from Ashley Bear, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing Ashley's last name correctly. Yeah. Are you configuring all the customers' connections for them? That's a very good question, actually. And if so, how do you handle their credentials?
I try to handle their credentials as little as possible. For Airbyte, all my Airbyte cloud stuff, I prefer cloud in that way because I don't need a Facebook app or a TikTok app or all that other stuff. So like wherever I can, I use cloud. And what I do is we just have a data connections call where I get on the phone with the customer. And since Airbyte Cloud has workspaces, I think, my feature nit here is I wish the credit moving across workspaces was a little bit nicer because I have to like mail my rep and say, hey, can you give this account 20 more credits? But whatever, we're getting there. I think it's on the roadmap. So I just do data connections call and they set all the stuff up. So they set up all their connections, but they don't have my secret keys to GCP. So then I set up all the destinations and then I basically complete the connect on my own. Again, I should be doing this by API more, but so I never get actually to access to their access tokens. So again, the exceptions being QuickBooks and Shopify, where we built our own integrations directly QuickBooks and Shopify, we built our own because they're just so core lifeblood things. We wanted to have them.
Glenn Rossman, and this is a question I'm curious about as well. And I was just wondering, looking at your customer list, when you have 20 customers, right? Yeah. How much are you pushing through Airbyte Cloud on a daily basis?
I have no idea. So I will say that because
generally everyone's answer, I guess.
Sorry. Like, I will say that we use cloud for all our ad sources, but I use OSS for QuickBooks and Shopify, and that's where most of my data load comes from. Again, I've been working with Airbyte for not quite 2 years, but close. So I started with OSS.
You were here before cloud.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, create cloud. So there was no cloud for which to use. So all of the Shopify stuff I did initially was, we built a Facebook app and a Google app, and I just bailed on them because I said I don't want to deal with this. I'll rather do cloud for that. So that was my cost savings there. But so I can't answer the question as to how much volume, but I think 92% of our volume or some random number is like coming via OSS because my Shopify connects or OSS. But it takes, but I'm paying for two connectors that are two containers that, are 64 gigs in RAM aggregate. So it's a lot of memory to do it.
Then how do you get Airbyte Cloud and, our OSS to work together? What do you do exactly from your end?
Yeah, so it's basically this file contains this little line here, Airbyte connection server. This knows if I'm using this, I wrote some code to say, if it sees this, the code when it builds the DAG file knows what it's doing. The core code sees the shop one and goes, oh, I better dispatch an API call to shop one. And if it sees this, it goes, oh, let's dispatch an API call to cloud.
Are you okay to answer a couple more questions? I know we're at time. There's a few more questions on here, which is amazing because we don't usually get this many questions. Usually it's all my questions. Yeah. But Tony also asked, is Airbyte deployed per customer in the customer-specific GCP project? If so, how do you orchestrate, say, Airbyte upgrades together? Or And are you using something like Terraform for this? A lot of questions bunched up in one, but that works.
That's good. No, and I'm happy. I have extra time, so I'm happy to answer questions if they keep coming. Okay. And is Airbyte okay? How do you get Airbyte Cloud and OSS to work together? So I think the cloud and OSS is I have a dispatcher layer that basically, that's a fancy word for a little bit of code that just tells like where am I posting to, and then Airbyte deployed per customer. Well, in cloud, I'm using workspaces. So yeah, it's nicely cleanly deployed. And again, I can do a data connections call, invite my partner on the other side who has the Facebook and the Google accounts, and they log in and do their connections. I'm doing shared infrastructure on my side on OSS with a couple containers, and orchestrating Airbyte upgrades together is not awesome. It's why cloud is great. And recently Shopify had a breaking change, and I had a connector that was like it was way, way far behind, and I couldn't upgrade it. So I ended up having to rebuild everybody's connections, which was painful. But I had to do it. So I should every interval or week or something be upgrading all my connectors, and I'm doing that and upgrading all my infrastructure. But I'm only running a few OSS containers. Again, I've chosen to make them fairly beefy as opposed to have 20 of them for that exact reason, because I don't want to orchestrate like 10 containers. And yes, I probably could use Terraform, but I'm not really like a Terraform guru, and it seems like a lot to manage 2 or 3 containers via Terraform.
And here's I guess a faster question to answer from Ashley.
Yep.
Is Airbyte deployment global as or per customer? Same question for the data warehouse.
Yeah, sure. So the Airbyte deployment is global. Again, I'm in OSS. I have one shared set of containers, and I have just multiple jobs running in those containers. And since that machine is inside of my infrastructure, it has the ability to write to the different data sets. And then data warehouses, I'm using Google Cloud. Each customer has their own GCP project. So everybody's GCP is completely sharded by user. And again, I will give customers on request, or if, in certain deals, access to their own warehouses, but it completely, one of my requirements is like I've lived in a sharded universe where you've got a key in a table that tells who the customer is, and invariably somebody makes a mistake and forgets it, and then like your customer, have you lived that? I was like, nope, everybody's data is completely disconnected, and I'm going to deal with the hard problem of like aggregating the data layer later.
And Michael Green's asking another question. And so the last question will be from Ryan, since we ran out of time. But so Michael Green asked this question, which is really interesting, and I feel like would apply to more people. If you aren't handling connections through Octavia, then how are you handling credential rotations? Or, he added, or I should say source destinations and etc.
Source destination. I'm pausing on that question because I don't quite know. Michael, maybe you could clarify. I don't understand what you're talking about with credential rotations.
Yeah, it looks like he's clarifying it. We can move on to the next question.
Great. Yeah.
And then, these would be the last questions. So from Fred, you talked about 64 gigs. So you're deploying OSS to a VM in GCP, or using Kubernetes or a third party?
No, I'm not using Kubernetes. I'm just doing straight up VMs using the very simple quick start guide from Airbyte to spin up containers.
No, for sure. And it looks like we have a user here, a Bainbridge user, no question, but we use Bainbridge and they are great. It's cool to hear more about the setup from Guardian Bike. Awesome. Okay, Michael Green is clarifying. This is the last question.
Yep.
And he's clarifying, if a customer changes their service account, password, etc., are you going into the UI and making the change manually? There you go. Thank you for clarifying that.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Unfortunately, I had this happen last week where somebody said, why is my Facebook data stopped? And we went and I said, did somebody leave recently? Like, oh yeah, the person. So the person that authed in left, they nuked them out of the account. So we had to go back in and fix it. So again, because I see what you're getting at, because I have them auth in and I'm choosing to defer that authentication, it can break, but usually it breaks because they, again, in this case, their marketing manager left and they shut them down, and then the ads split.
It's not your fault if it breaks. It's never.
Well, they were kind of like what happened. It took us jumping on a call for about 2 minutes and me going like, how do I ask, like, is anybody gone? I'm like, oh yeah, they're gone. I'm like, okay, cool. And they do just re-auth in 5 minutes. We were back up and running, right? It's simple. But yeah, that happened.
Excellent. It looks like that's the end of the questions. Derek, seriously, I want to thank you for joining this community call. It was a great turnout, and we learned a lot. So I really appreciate this. If anyone wants to learn more about Bainbridge, can they contact you directly on LinkedIn? Well, you're pretty busy. So how can they find more about Bainbridge in the future?
Yeah, LinkedIn works. I mean, BainbridgeGrowth.com works. My email is Derek Y, DEREKY at BainbridgeGrowth.com. Happy to answer questions, or, if you liked what you heard, and you're always looking to, bring folks on board that know what they're doing in the data realm as well. So if you feel that this is an interesting problem, let me know.
Perfect. And it looks like people leaving the emails, Harry at BainbridgeGrowth.com. You can reach out to Harry on there as well for any questions. Perfect. Well, again, Derek, I really appreciate this. Everyone, thank you for joining the call, and we'll see everyone again next one. Thanks, Derek. Have a good one.
Thank you.